And which page is it going from?
We are live. Welcome everyone. We are live on the Bridging the Divide Facebook page and rippling out through many Facebook pages and Facebook groups of this conversation. And my name is Sommer Joy Raymer. I'm the co-founder of the SINE network, all around synergized impact for solutions of this time on Earth. A significant conversation that I've been in with these extraordinary women. And we are constantly, there are new women coming into this conversation as well. I've been off with my numbers, but I know for sure now this is the 6th one that we've been doing for 6 months now. I know. And it is all about bridging the divide, a conversation around which now is really about, I am not racist, but am I anti-racist is the topic. It's like part 2. Today in this conversation, we'll be in for about an hour and a half. You're going to be able to meet all of these women. And I'm here in this conversation. It all started with Antoinette Rootsdawtah. So I just want to pass over to Antoinette and let's get started.
Well, greetings everyone. Welcome ladies for our 6th episode of Bridging the Divide. And we're continuing this conversation, which I think is a very important conversation that we could probably just spend all year on. But basically it is, I am not racist, but am I anti-racist? And I think this is a very good topic to cover because I know a lot of people always say they're not racist, which I get that. And it's like, yes, you treat me with equal love and respect like you would treat everybody else, practicing the golden rule. But also as we, continue on with the golden rule, is like, it's not just you on a personal level on one-on-one, but it's how everybody else is treated and being affected. So so maybe you're not racist to me, but what about, the people who look like me, even though you say you would one-on-one, but we're living in a condition right now of systematic racism that's been happening for hundreds of years. And it's happening not just in America, but all over the world. And people have become complacent and they have become passive in what's actually happening. So it's like, even though if you're good to me on an individual basis, what about the society that I'm actually living in as far as where I work and where I live and the education and the health services that I'm actually receiving? This is something, if we're doing part of the golden rule, if they would like those things to be treated on a equal level in fair and justice with dignity and equity, how do we play that all across the board for all people? And we say Black Lives Matter because we know that when Black Lives Matter, all lives matter will matter as well too. Everybody across the board will start getting the same fairness and justice that we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who wants to start. And if you don't mind, Summer, making me co-host too, because I would like to just record this and also to share a short video in a minute too.
Maybe we should start by defining again racism for those who may not know what that is. Perhaps we can all go around and say what it means to us, and then perhaps we can coalesce on what it actually means. Does that make sense? And I have a Merriam-Webster definition open here, but I kind of want everybody to give their own idea, because that's ultimately what everybody in society is functioning off of, is their own, what's in their mind, what does it mean to them, and give all the things that you can think of that you feel relates to racism.
Sounds excellent. All right, so who wants to go first, or should I just call on people?
Yeah, call them out.
All right, I'm gonna go across the screen and everything. Dr. Quinlan, I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay, so first of all, let me just introduce myself. My name is Dr. Quinlan Strong, and my doctor's degree is in psychology. I love to teach and educate, and I am just blessed to be part of this group. I was kind of thinking about racism and anti-racism, and I too, like you, Nichelle, am very deep into the dictionary and stuff, and so I took a look at that, and recently it has changed what anti-racism actually means in Webster's dictionary.
Isn't that interesting?
Racism means not just, I'm a protector, and so racism to me is not just about the color of my skin, but it's about financial. It is about mental health. It is about justice across the board. So for me, racism encompasses a variety of situations, even education.
And by racism, what do you mean? What are the effects that a couple of the effects that you're speaking, that you're thinking of when you say racism means a lot to me across the board? Because I think that will help others latch on to what it perhaps means to
You know,
them.
I'll tell you, and I'm at fault for this, and I want to be first to own this. I was at a function the other day that was well taken care of in regards to the health needs and things like that. And so I was speaking to a woman who was of brown skin. And I said to her, "Are you making tamales for the Christmas holidays?" And I caught myself and I said, "I am so sorry." Because what I did is I made an assumption based upon the color of her skin, racism, that she was going to be making tamales for Christmas. And so I have to own that for my own self when I look at racism and how smoothly it can come out, and I could have walked away from that and not have owned it.
That's a good one. Anyone else got any, do any other examples come to mind? Ashley?
Yeah,
Maybe.
yes, hello, sure. You know, it's funny. I remember, and I tell this story a lot, that I grew up in the East Bay near Richmond, California. I was born in Oakland. I grew up in a very ethnically diverse place and didn't even know racism still existed. Like it was so, I guess, so subtle and so covert when I grew up that I didn't even know that it was still a thing. I thought Martin Luther King came and washed it all away, you know, with this big movement, until I went to college and I actually studied racism and social justice and learned how serious the problem still is in the USA today. And, you know, that's almost well, I'm not going to age myself, but that was a while ago. And I learned that, you know, racism it comes in many forms. It comes it comes through socialization, and it also comes through institution, and it is the oppression of people based on their skin color, the marginalization of people based on their skin color, and it yeah, and it's a sneaky thing to keep alert on, most definitely on a daily basis, but it's a worthy thing to stay alert on and to call out as often as possible. That's sort of my story and understanding of racism.
I heard some generalities, but what I'm looking for are examples, because I think people who are watching want to go, was that racist when I did that? Oh, that's racist. I didn't know that was. You know, those
Examples,
types of
yeah.
examples, when you say, when you give a generality, you need to hone it down into, for someone who's been living under a rock and doesn't know this word.
Well, I can say, I can give you an example of a time where I noticed racism in my youth, coming from someone I knew, a white man that I knew. And that really shocked me, actually, as a young woman. And it was on Thanksgiving Day as we were driving past a park, and he saw some assumingly Latin people, Central American, South American, playing soccer. And he said, that's how they celebrate Thanksgiving. That's how they celebrate Thanksgiving. It was a very condescending and assumptive thing to say based on the color of their skin, which did not necessarily indicate their actual ethnic background either. So there were a lot of assumptions going around there. So something like that strikes me as definitely racist.
That's a good one. Anyone else? And if someone else wants to take over, I'm open. Mira, Michelle?
Hi, it's so wonderful to be here with you, ladies. I'm Mira Michelle, and I'm a healer and the founder and director of a movement for empowering women called Sacred Female Rising Institute. And racism is like a disease. I consider racism like a disease. And it has to do with ignorance, insecurity, and hate. And one particular moment for myself came out. I was with as far as your request for an example, I was with my best friend, and this is about, I don't know, about 25 years ago, I guess. And she was newly married, and her husband was Jewish American. And we were talking about something about bartering, the barter system, and talking. And then I said, oh yeah, I was at this market and this guy was really going hard on me. And, you know, I tried to Jew him down. I said those words, you know, it just came out of my mouth. And he looked at me, and, you know, I had a good relationship with her husband, and he goes, please don't use that term. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was, you know, I was crying. I was so ashamed of myself. I don't know how it came out of my mouth. In fact, I don't think that ever came out of my mouth. And it was a huge lesson for me, how those unconscious patterns and things you've heard can come out of your mouth and you don't even realize you're carrying them. And I just got so hot in my body. I was so ashamed. And I must have told him, you know, like 50 times. He goes, would you please stop saying you're sorry? Now, I know you didn't want to say that, but it came out of your mouth, didn't it? And I go, yeah, it did. So this is how deep the unconscious patterning can go. And it was a wonderful lesson for me. Painful at the time, but really wonderful.
That's a good one. Nina, you raised your hand earlier.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to everything that was already said. Some of the terms that were said really I resonated with, like what Ashley said about racism being sneaky. And I'm really very happy to be here. I'm really happy to see everyone. And I just observed also the self-awareness that are in the participants right here, the contributors in this session, of their own unconscious biases. And that's really wonderful to see, because to me, racism relates to the ignorance, to our unconscious, like Mira Michelle said, unconscious biases that we don't even know how large it is. Just like Antoinette said, that it's not always direct for me. It's a lot of it is the way we live our lives and our own awareness of the part that we play in the whole system, for me, is what racism is. And to give an example, you know, I've met some people who, for example, I mean, I'm not really gonna name, you know, names, but there are people that I've met who, you know, go through a lot of struggles and ending up, it's also, I'm sorry, because it's a very complicated concept, but it's also related to stigma. So some people ending up blaming themselves, you know, some people ending up having that stigma, that label that's stigmatized in the society, when actually they're in that place because of where the structure of the system has put them. And in that structure, other people who are not aware or who are not educating themselves about that structure, that are making these people hate themselves, and because they hate and making them be in that circumstance that they hurt other people, given all of this mental implications of what the system is, the environment that this system is giving them, that is not very conducive to, you know, their well-being. So seeing that dynamic play out where people, instead of being viewed as someone that we need to empower, they are actually being viewed as someone who are, I don't know, like not a good person in a society. And the ignorance of other people not seeing that and actually blaming those people, to me, is racism. I don't know if that's clear. I know that's like going around, but so to see the self-awareness of the people who already contributed in the conversation, I think that is how to be an anti-racist. It starts there, to have a self-awareness of our own unconscious biases. And I've also done that with some people. I've also made statements that are based on assumptions about other people that really made me feel, embarrassed, and it doesn't feel good when I also have my unconscious biases, and it was also done to me as well. So and part of that, I think, being anti-racist is also kind of, I know it's per situation, but it also giving space for other people to make mistakes, but at the same time, it's also based on the situation as to whether there should be accountability, or we can like kind of let other people make mistakes. So for me, that's racism. I'm sorry if it's going around all over the place, but yeah, that's how I can communicate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Would anyone else like to contribute? I think everybody should weigh in on this. We're all talking about it. Who wants to go next? Nancy, and then Sommer.
You can unmute yourself. There
you
you go.
hear me better with the mic on. You know, I have a very difficult time comprehending racism because I understand it on some level. I've never seen it. I've seen prejudice. I'm a Jewish woman. So I know the prejudice that can be. You can't see I'm Jewish, but like I moved to Virginia from New Jersey and people said, you better not tell people you're Jewish down there. It's like, yes, I will. And also I was brought up in the high school I went to was color friendly in Asbury Park, New Jersey. My mother was very involved with the civil rights of the 60s and would march with Martin Luther King and marches for the civil rights of that time. So I was introduced to it, but never, like I said, I couldn't comprehend that people actually could feel that way towards another human being. Even though I had experienced in the 60s, my daughter, I have to share this story with you because like I said, anyway, when she was about 5 years old, she had a best friend who was a sweet little black child. And they were out on the front lawn and a friend of mine came into my house and said, and this was in the 70s, and said, do you know there's a colored kid on your lawn? And my daughter looked at me and said, what color? Because she didn't comprehend that. But that kind of comment was like, what? So that's kind of a little bit of what I've experienced or seen or felt. I'm about 40 minutes out of Charlottesville. So a couple years ago when they had the marches and I heard watch my language, the phrase, there are fine people on both sides, that revved me up and like, okay, it's time to get reunited with you because this is, I'm sorry, the injustice, the ignorance, again, I can't comprehend that kind of hate. So I don't know if that answered or had anything to do with anything, but share.
I have a question for Nancy. Is that okay?
Sure.
Nancy, you had mentioned about feeling racism. My question, and maybe it's a question for everyone, do you think racism is a feeling or a thought or both?
That's a good question. I think for me, it was a feeling only because of how I was raised without it, went to schools, like I said, that were color friendly. I don't know it. I think it's a feeling or a visual, or I just think you can feel negative. And to me, it's very negative. When I was leaving high school in 66, that's kind of when the riots started happening in Asbury Park, well, and a lot of places. So that was the first time I saw it within my own place, as opposed to, you know, with Martin Luther King and those marches back then. So a thought, I think if it's just a thought, I think that's too fleeting. So your mic's off. I see your lips moving, but I can't read lips.
No, it's just saying thank you so much.
Thank you. I also want us to because I'm hearing some comments, because like when she said the tamales and the Jew statement, you
Right.
know, which are offensive, you know, a lot of people would find that offensive, and some people wouldn't find it offensive, and others would find it offensive. But then still a difference between being racist, you know, it's a racist statement, but not necessarily like as a racist action, between like personal bias, personal conceptions or judgments against the race of people. You know, like a lot of us are going to have unconscious bias, you know. I think all people can sit there and have unconscious bias against another race, and assuming, you know, Asian people are this, Latin people are this, Native Americans are like this, you know, and white people are or whatever. And that's part of the unconscious bias. But when it comes to racism, which racism is a really form of systematic oppression. You know, I could say the word Jew or Somali and piss somebody off, but I can't stop them from being able to get a job, or to be denied housing, or to be denied equal justice, or to be denied a lot of different things that are actually physically happening to people. You know, so that's why I want to be clear, like when we're talking about, you know, that's why we're talking about, like, there's one thing to not be racist, you know, like I wouldn't do that, but being anti-racist is also part of the whole problem of racism versus personal unconscious bias or prejudice or
I
bigotry.
think
You know, like
prejudice is what we're talking about
prejudice.
versus racism.
Right.
It's not unconscious bias, it's conscious.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about, we're talking about what comes from your brain. But racism is different than prejudice. Racism more implies a systemic squelching of freedom, for lack of a better phrase. It's racism means you, yeah, like Antoinette said, you can say, I see you, Selena, you can say something about tamales, or you can say something about Jewish people, but it doesn't mean that you have the power. Racism is prejudice plus power,
Mm-hmm.
which attacks your personal freedom, your human rights. I can't as a Black person, keep someone from getting a job unless I own the company.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, unless I'm a landlord, I can't keep you from getting a place to live. I can't keep your children from going to a certain school. I can't keep you from getting a loan or getting certain funding. I can't keep you from buying even a piece of furniture. If I don't have the power to do so. And the people who are in power, who own this power structure of racism, white supremacy, are white people. So I can throw all kinds of epithets all I want to as a Black person, but I don't have the power to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because you don't have the.
I own some part of that structure. But even then, if I can own a corporation and still be a victim of racism as a Black person, because I don't own the world financial structure. Even the president of the United States is a victim of racism, even though he was the leader of the free world.
Mm-hmm.
Tina,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna let Selena. But before I let Selena, but basically to say what you're saying is like you're given boots without the bootstraps. So everybody's got the boots, but some of us are missing the bootstraps. But yes, Selena, and then I think Mira or Nancy had something to say.
I just want to say something real quick to Mira Michelle, because you said you're going to Jew them. Now, I don't know, because I have a sense of humor, crazy sense of humor. See, I kind of find that funny. And I'm trying to think if people I grew up with would be offended by that. So I don't see that as racism at all, Mira Michelle. I don't even think it was a prejudice comment. I think it was, I'm seeing it like you're a Jewish comedian.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
So we'll let Nancy have that, but we're not speaking for all Jewish people because I don't want them all phoning us up and getting all mad at us and stuff.
Wait, here. Call me.
I'll call Nancy. She said it. It was all right, Selena.
Okay, I was born in Santa Monica, and my father's job took him to South Carolina in the early part of the 70s. And we moved to an island in the Sea Islands of South Carolina called Beaufort. And I remember moving to this different environment. I became more aware of racism. We were always taught to be aware and to be aware of the fact that it existed. Because I remember that a little boy that lived next door to us when we lived in Santa Monica, his mother didn't want us to play with us because we were Black.
Santa Monica, California.
In Santa Monica, California, that's right. And my little friend that lived up the street from us had a cross burned on her front lawn. This was in Santa Monica, California, because her parents were interracial. So my family moves to the Deep South, and the school district where I started, which was like the second half of the holidays in second grade, was 1 year. It had been 1 year that it had been integrated. So 1971 was the first full year that the schools in Beaufort County, South Carolina, had been integrated. So you're dealing with it like up front. And I remember teachers being a little hostile and a little condescending and a little surprised every time I would speak. I recall one particular within the same experiment, but having a teacher in the fourth grade tell the students that that we were talking about careers and what we wanted to do when we grew up. And I remember saying I wanted to go to college. And she said that wasn't a realistic expectation for colored. And when I spoke back to her, she accused me of back talking her, and she sent me to the principal's office because she said I sassed her. And so I felt that, it was kind of like, why can't I go to college? Why is that unrealistic? She said, well, coloreds should stick to things that are more suited for them. Like cleaning yards. There's nothing wrong with being a gardener or a maid or, she named a couple other things and said, well, no, my parents expect me to go to college and that's what I'm going to do. So, well, that's not a realistic expectation. And so I remember many, many years later when I graduated from high school, I remember I sent her an invitation to my graduation to let her know that I was going to Columbia College, which is a traditionally all-female, traditional Southern women's college. And, just the shock on her face for that, but it doesn't end there. Racism has a tendency to cause discouragement in a person. It causes them to almost develop a sense of self-loathing. My sister, who was an extremely beautiful singer, she could sing opera. She was we went to the same college and she started in advanced standing and it just tore her down. She, at some point toward the end of her life, she didn't want to sing anymore and I suspect it's because of racism. And racism enters higher education where the expectation is that you're not intelligent enough, that your brain is too small. They have theories that back up their foolishness. And I call it foolishness because I felt like I had to fight it when I was in higher education. I got into college, I talked my way in, I let them test me, by putting me in courses, and I graduated, and I've gone to many schools of higher education. And it is really difficult to hear people that you expect to be, that I learned there's a difference between being trained and being educated. Because trained people do what they do. Educated people become enlightened by what they hear and see that there might be a reason for change. And I found that really kind of upsetting, seeing the bell curve study and just hearing certain individuals talk to you in a certain way that just makes you just want to choke them and say, oh, you speak so well. And I said, what do you mean that I speak so well? Am I not supposed to speak well? Am I not supposed to be able to remember information that is told to me? Am I not supposed to synthesize the information and be able to demonstrate my understanding of what I'm doing? Why is that a problem?
Supposed to sound like a 19th century sharecropper. That's what seems to be comfortable for everybody who's not Black. When they hear, so if you don't sound like a 19th century sharecropper, there's something wrong.
Yes, and I have to say that there's a movie that's been out, 12 Years a Slave, and then there's another film where they spoke in a certain rhythmic kind of almost poetic verse. And growing up in the place where the first shot of the Civil War, you constantly see how people feel about things. And having individuals have issues with you based on your skin. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? That's painful. I have a patient that I see regularly, and to tell you how deeply I understand in a way why her delusion went to the extent that it went to. She's in her late 70s, early 80s, and she grew up in a part of South Carolina that's part of what's called the corridor of shame, meaning that school district was not funded appropriately. And she sometimes, when she gets really angry, she says, they never wanted me to have an education. I wanted to go to school and they didn't want me to have anything. And then when she flips it on her head, when you think about how she really feels about being treated a certain way because of her color of her skin, she's decided that I was raised white, that I'm white, and that my medicine has made me Black. And that's why y'all treat me the way you do. You want me to take this medicine so that you can treat me bad because of the color that the medicine makes. I mean, it's very complicated, but you think about it. Sometimes that's what racism can do for different parts of the population. How do you think a person feels when you have something against them that they can't change? If I were rude, maybe I can work on my manners. If I eat with my hands, should I work on my etiquette? If I dress badly, I could probably go to someone to help me dress better. But what can I do about my skin? And so I present that to you as how racism feels and how it can affect a person. I could either hate myself or I can love myself in spite of that. And so I've went beyond that. I went ahead and I went to school. And I kept going to school. Whenever I needed to make a change, that's what I did. And in the field that I'm in now, you still have it. Highly educated people, but still have the same issues.
You make
So
a great
how
point.
does one fix that?
You make a great point, because I think I didn't even think about like going back to that part as far as like, besides like the physical, the systematic part of it. But you're right. I think every Black person sitting here going through school have had those same obstacles of telling you what you can and what you can't do. The teachers who fought me because they were very conservative right wing. And when I didn't agree, they fought against every move that I made, because I wasn't allowed to have an opinion. I wasn't allowed to, the way they fought me as a gymnast in an all white gymnastic team, from back in the 80s. Our girls been studying for decades, with private tutors and trainers. And I just don't think you'd be able to handle it. And I'm like, well, something, the more they've always fought me on these issues was the more that made me like come at them even stronger, that anything that they tell me that I can't do, I actually can. But not everybody has the same temperament and personality that I have. You know, I'm a
Right.
fighter. It really pisses me off when people fight me. It's like, if you're gonna fight me, I'm gonna fight back so hard. It's like you just woke up a hornet's nest, because every time you try to stop me, I'm gonna be flying all over the place and be all up in your face about everything. So keep pushing those buttons. But a lot of
Yeah.
people, it's you know, for a lot of other people, the more that you keep hearing this negativity and just diminishing your worth and your value, you start, you know, I see a lot of them just start to just, you know, the insecurities and the feelings and these things just start to just come trace down, passing on to our children. They might have gotten it from their mothers. They might, you know, and different things. And they're going on through life always second guessing and always questioning, you know, what their full potential and their full capabilities are. You know, and it's some very, very little things, because it's the little things about how they tell you can't, into the things that where they actually do. And it's just weird because you mentioned it. You know what? Another two examples of racism against my husband. One, how they kicked us out of the stratosphere in Las Vegas. You know, when this white woman sat there and made a false report saying that he put his hands on her when she was the one who physically attacked him, and had the security and the police throw us out of the hotel. That's a physical form of racism based off of racial profiling. Another slight version of racism, ever since he made that video, Black Lives Matter 2, when you mention 12 Years a Slave, that movie is Disney compared to all the other movies out there. You know, people's like, oh, you know, because when I went to go see the movie in Hollywood, it was like 300 white people in the audience. Me and Pato was just looking around, just looking at them, because they're all just bawling, sitting in the audience bawling. I'm like, this ain't even hardcore. Don't you remember Roots? Roots 1 and Roots 2 is hard. Amistad is hard. Rosewood is hard. If you can't make it through 12 Years a Slave, how are you going to make it through these other films? This is truth and reality.
Well,
And that little clip, all he did, so YouTube has put several blockers on his video, because it was because whoever ratted out, you know, I don't like to use the term Karen, but whatever Karens had called up or wrote to YouTube or flagged and did whatever to our thing, you know, they make it so difficult for people to watch the video just because he used a few clips from the movie. It was not a royalty thing. It's just the artistic piece of showing the reality of what was happening. You know, so there's some scenes a little bit from Amistad and a little bit from Roots, but they sat there and blocked his video. But they have no problem showing world star hip hop, Black people murdering each other on the street. They have no problem us looking at George Floyd, you know, Black people being murdered day and night on TV and on YouTube, on Facebook. We can look at visually these things, but we couldn't even use a little clip of history from a movie because it's deemed inappropriate. So this is where whoever powers that be are able to sit there and stop us from telling the truth. All right, I'm done.
they're not. It is an. I would say it's an uncomfortable issue for a lot of people. But you know, confronting someone with that reality is it can be enlightening for both people. You know, you think about
Selena,
it.
let me ask you though, is it uncomfortable or is it blind?
Well, they're blind, but they're blind and in some ways, they're not accustomed to someone pulling it out of the dark. It's not a conversation that's on the margins. I just take it straight to them. I recall my supervisor in undergrad. We were studying art. I was a fine arts major. And I asked him, why is it that in the whole world of art, there aren't any people of color in this art history class? We have 400 slides we're supposed to study. 250 of them we have to know well enough to recognize. Why aren't any of them people of color? Now, I suspect that Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, and Diego Rivera are not the only three people of color in the whole entirety of art. And then I realized, and I caught myself, and I realized, and I told him, and I told this to him to his face, perhaps it is that you aren't as well educated in art history, that you were taught only about the Europeans and not about other people. But the history is a rainbow-colored rope. We're all in there together. We don't exist in separate lines like the weft of a woven when you're weaving, and you have those straight lines and you're weaving the colors over and under. it's a whole court, and it's multicolored, and everybody is all wrapped in there. We are all in the same timeline. When Diego was doing something, somebody else was doing something at the same time. Same thing with Catlin. Same thing with Michelangelo. All of them were existing at the same time. So why are you teaching art as if there was a whole century of just Europeans, a whole century of another race of people, another race of people? It's kind of confusing. I said, I want to learn about the rest of them too. And I think that all art students should do that. And he just kind of looked at me like I had lost my mind.
Oh, yes, because at that point in time, you're considered an angry Black woman.
I was calm, but I insisted, and he had to accommodate me because this is a women's college. And so he had to accommodate me. And of course, that was a little angry. He was the angry white man because you will not believe what they titled the course. They called it Art History for the Black Student. That was the title of the course. That's what's on my.
That's like the left-handed scissors.
Wow. Let me just slap you now.
Yes, that's exactly what he titled that course after I had this long conversation with him and how it was important for us to be educated and not trained. Educated means that I can look at the art piece and I can figure out what period it came from and how it was done and what materials were used. I think we should all be able to do that, not just, so we like our own aesthetic. Why is that a problem? And so that's what he came up with. And I was one of 3 other people in the course. No white girls were expected to take it because, there are no boys at our school. There were no men, all women. But yeah, so that is racism at a lot of levels. When it comes to education, you have to become the angry Black woman in order to bring an issue to their attention. To this day, he always wants to speak to me because I guess in some way, after a period of time, you become, I don't know. I always pray for for people's enlightenment because I feel that I'm being cautious because I've experienced these things directly and I know why. And I don't treat them the way they treat me. I try to be kinder. I always expect kindness and sometimes I get disappointed. It disappoints me when I know that someone's issue with me is something I can't adjust. Am I too loud? Shall I talk softer?
Mm-hmm.
Or, all of them. And that's how that's how I've experienced it. Mm-hmm. And living in a state where there's a lot of that. Lindsey Graham is from here. Strom Thurmond, another person is from here. I have met both of these people. After I left when I was in college, I was in politics with a girlfriend of mine and she was their director. And so I would meet these people and be around these people on a regular basis. So it is a thing that is painful to deal with at times. Mm-hmm. And you find yourself having to be extraordinarily on your A game. Your A game is something far beyond you than you can imagine. And it's because you're dealing with people whose expectations are so low of you. They have a certain, their stereotypes are real to them. And I have to deal with the fact that my thoughts about them are true. That yes, they will not like me because I am Black. They will expect me to be less intelligent and not speak as well. And so that can be a troubling issue. And so you find yourself having to be you have to be super A all the time.
And when you guys speak about
and also be mindful of the fact that you don't know one day from the next whether or not you're going to have a job.
That is also true.
Yes.
Very much
for no reason.
Absolutely. And I have been in the field, and I'll share my age. I'm 55. I graduated from Columbia College in 88. And I have been in education. I have been in law, and I've been in mental health. And all 3 of those, the movement from one to the other had a lot to do with who you know and how someone felt about your ability to continue. Mm-hmm. And it was less about incompetence because you have to be a baller on every single one of those. That whole thing about being twice as good is true. I used to think that wasn't until I had to start really kicking my game up. And I'm in mental health, and this is where it is. This is my truest sense of my career self. The other things were all our additions that have added to this particular profession. But it is, you're right, it is very much a thing about whether or not you're going to be able to continue.
Mhm. And something you mentioned about education earlier too, is that the racism is also the writers of history. You know, the victors, you know, who writes the history and who rewrites the history. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, but a few years ago, I don't know what this guy's name is, this black guy named David Barton or whatever, rewriting history, you know, trying to make it seem like, you know, black people were indentured servants and they weren't slaves. And the rewriting of history and or the leaving out of history, because like you said, there was so much history that's going on in Europe. A lot of people don't even know that for 800 years in Europe, the Moors were in control. Where do you think all that Black Madonna and Virgin Marys was you know, Virgin Mary and Black Jesuses were coming from? Those are down there in those art museums and down there put away in the Vatican and in all this stuff, you know, the sciences, the art, the cosmology, the, you know, the medicine, all these things that was brought out of Africa into Europe. You know, the whole thing with the what did you call it? Those when they brought sanitation and, you know, it was just so many discoveries, all these things that were just left out, because I really heard people tell me that the reason why the white race has to progress and why the fear, because I do hear this from people, the fear of the white race is that it becomes dominated by people of color. And if the white race dies off, then they won't be, who's going to sit there and civilize the rest of the world? Who's going to sit there and teach them all these things? I'm like, wait a second, you didn't invent everything by yourself. There's inventors all over the world that we just never heard about. Nobody knows about these things. And it's like, and then, but the one who got the credit, it's like, he's the one up on the front thing, but it's like, there's all that history is there that we are not having access to within our schools, that the parents are not actually doing for their children. Because I had to sit there and supplement my child's education because I knew the school was not going to give her the full thing. I said, Makeda, and those of you who met my daughter, I was like, Makeda, you're going to know about Panama deception. You're going to sit there and know about the Iran-Contra affair. You're going to watch Roots. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You're going to get all this stuff that you didn't know because you're going to know about Marcus Garvey. Why don't nobody know about Marcus Garvey here in America and stuff, you know? So
and I would say this, they cannot teach what they do not know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I would like to ask y'all to think about that. How can a person teach something that they themselves do not know? And that's what I found when I spoke with that particular professor, that I can't expect you to teach something that you don't know. And if in your course of your education, if your education is incomplete, meaning you don't know about other people and other things, then you can't very well teach it. So even though later on when I was actually doing the teaching, I found that one of my greatest skills that was given to me at an HBCU, because I've gone to both a traditional white college and an HBCU, that you have to learn to teach yourself things. Mm-hmm. And that was an extremely important skill, to teach yourself the things you need to know. And so I would say that, why don't they teach that? Well, how could they teach that if the person who's teaching them hasn't been taught? So if the teacher doesn't teach, the student doesn't learn. If the student doesn't learn, then how can the student teach something they don't know? So I would say that would be how I would give them a breath on that. I don't expect them to teach things they don't know. Mm-hmm. I would ask, are you interested enough to realize that culturally, from community to community, that it may be beneficial to learn about the people that you're teaching? Mm-hmm. And that all of them are not just like you. We adapt and we passport check between the worlds. You might find that beneficial to you and yours to be able to do the same. Mm-hmm. You will find that you can become a universal citizen if you're able to check your passport between the worlds, as opposed to being stuck in your little bubble and not being able to cross the bridge.
Right. I saw Nancy raising her hand. Nancy.
Yeah, because that's so interesting. Antoinette, I was mentioning last night about these Gullah Geechee people. which
Those are my people.
and it's
Those are our people.
saying,
Our
why
family,
were
we're
we-
Geechee.
Are you really?
Big time. I kid you not. When I went, now think about it, Santa Monica, California, and then you get moved to the island. I literally went back where my people came in, and I kid you not, I did not understand a word they said. My teacher barely, well, she was a Southern white woman, so I kind of understood her accent, but the kids were gullah. And I could, to this day, when I have a patient who's from the Low Country, I understand every word they say. It's a rapid,
Goosebumps
fast,
about this.
yeah, and they can, and the people in the Sea Islands of South Carolina can talk to the people in Sierra Leone. There's a gentleman by the name of Emery Campbell. He's a family friend. He went to Texas, where our other part of our family lives, because they speak Geechee, Gullah there as well, and they were able to communicate. It was a three-way communication.
I learned about this, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I've been researching and reading and wanting to go there so strongly, and have been asking people and wondering, why did we never learn this very important part of American history? Yes,
Because it involves Black people. If there's too much Black in there, nobody likes it if they're not Black. See?
Well, and I would also say that there's a certain amount of shame, and I find it funny because, again, I came to Beaufort in the early part of the 70s, and it's hilarious to me that my home people, the people I went to school with, that they are all of a sudden all pro Geechee. They call themselves Geechee because you used to have to fight somebody if you called them a Geechee, and so now they're all in. They've developed a self-love, which is beautiful to me, because I remember when they used to be so shamed that they just couldn't deal. You would get beat up behind calling somebody a Geechee. And so now they're like very proudly standing up and saying, yes, this is where I'm from. They don't try to say they're from Hilton Head. No, I'm from Beaufort or St. Helena or Land's End or Frogmore, those different parts of the Sea Island. But it's that is a fascinating thing. It's a beautiful change of events there.
I am getting so emotional about this because there's a tree there. I was reading today about Gullah Geechee foods and today I was reading about that. And you know the tree I'm talking about, right? That angel
I believe oh yes, the angel tree that's on there. Yeah. There's a road that leads into Beaufort. That's there's a whole ghost story, and there's yes, I do know what you're talking about, the angel tree. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Charleston area, but the Low Country is where when I was not at school up in Columbia, I was always down in the Low Country visiting historical parts of Charleston. And so the angel tree, I am familiar with that.
Okay, so we're coming up on the hour, and we'll have technically 30 minutes left. I think we have a good idea. Sorry to interrupt everybody. I want to know about Gullah Geechee Island too. That's another show. But I want to also talk about—
That literally is.
Yeah, it is. I also want to talk about what it means in contrast to be anti-racist. We know, we all have some ideas of what racism is. We know we've spoken generally and in detail with different examples, but what exactly does anti-racism look like in the face of, say, you are an employee at a school and you hear a teacher who's a good friend of yours, who is, you're white, the teacher's also white, or maybe you're of some other ethnicity other than European descent, and you hear a teacher say something disparaging about a student in that, denigrates their culture, or, speaks to some stereotype. These are kind of true and false answers, or yes and no answers, or, if you want to make them discussion answers. Do you allow them to continue with that train of thought, or do you check them in the moment? And the answer here is checking people in the moment.
And if there's someone that you know personally, maybe you might not know how to form the words to tell them off at that moment. And maybe it's not always telling them off, but it is a correction, and it's a form of correction.
Nichelle she posted something in here, and I think this actually it works. It's very relevant since we are coming up to the holidays. But maybe the panel here, can give some tips, on tips for assisting people to overcome their racist families during the holidays.
Yes, this sounds chunky. Go for it.
Really good. And sometimes, you may not actually have someone say racist during the thing, but you could always bring up a question about something, and pull it out of them just to get their thoughts on it and check them on it, So we haven't heard from you yet, Heather. Do you have any suggestions or ideas or tips, like when because we all got one in our family somewhere, even in our Black families, we all got one that's
and talk about the artwork that's behind you.
Thank you all. My heart is really, really full right now. I'm in awe, constantly in awe of the wisdom that's shared and the beauty and the transparency. It's really an honor to be here with you all. So much flowing around my head and my heart. Well, in order to check anybody else, we need to check ourselves, is what I feel called to reflect at this moment. And so if we're willing to be in that consistent process, and I'm of course especially speaking to white people, if we're willing to be in that process within ourselves to become more and more conscious of how racism is really a part of every single aspect of our society in America, across the globe, of course. I know America because I was born and raised here, so I can speak more clearly to that. And growing up in the South, I've become clearer and clearer that we have really yet to have a tried and true, quote unquote, reconstruction after the Civil War. That there's so much work to be done, and it starts with each of us and what's going on internally. And to speak to Dr. Q's question, I feel like racism is a thought and a feeling. I mean, it's all of it. And so an example I feel guided to share about something that I've come to realize that maybe is a more subtle aspect of the racism that is present within our heads as white people is our language. Oh, and there's this beautiful, beautiful being that just showed up. What a blessing. Hi, Pato.
Hi, Pato.
Is in the language that we use and these terms that we use that we're just unconsciously using and not realizing that history that we were never taught, the history behind it. So a couple of those aspects of the languaging, and this is really, I think, is more of a Southern thing, but like using phrases like cotton picking and even the eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Like, I just unconsciously have said those things growing up because that's what I heard my family and my friends saying. And to really know what that means and the harm that is done when we unconsciously use language like that and the origins of those words and those phrases, it's traumatic and it's harmful. And so even if we feel like, oh, I'm not racist, I love all people and I feel like all people are equal, like there's really deep, more subtle aspects of the racism that we need to be really aware of and be willing to admit that they're part of our conditioning and they're harmful, and be willing to check ourselves and transmute them, like discontinue that from being part of our language and part of how we relate and express ourselves.
What do you need to admit?
What do I need to admit? That unconsciousness that I've had, like what I just shared is a part of that. Like just things that I learned growing up that I never even questioned because it was like quote unquote normal. And I didn't even realize the deeper layers to it and the history there. That history piece is huge. You know, I think about growing up in Dallas, Texas in the 80s, which was where the part I grew up in was another wave of the integration. And children from the projects were being bused in to our school. And we were never taught why those Black children were living in the projects. We were never taught about redlining. We were never taught about intergenerational poverty. It was just something that was accepted and quote unquote normal. And we would observe certain teachers really bullying and being abusive to our Black friends, but we're never taught about why that was going on. It was just like this normal thing. And then I moved to Austin right before high school to a primarily white community that literally became that community because they wanted to avoid integration. I came to find out just a few months ago. And I had people in my family telling me I shouldn't be friends with the 4 Black kids at my school because the white kids weren't going to want to be friends with me. And that was like really like the first realization that I had of what racism is and how prominent it is. That's when it first started coming to my consciousness.
So one of the themes that's coming forth when I hear you talk, Heather, sorry, Antoinette, is the word courage. Because, and we talked about this at the end of the last episode, at the end of the first episode, courage, because, you know, you mentioned that someone you knew was telling you not to talk to the Black children because then the white children will not want to play with you. That stretches into adulthood. That don't talk to the Black children because then the white children, don't talk to the Black adults because then the white adults won't want to play with you. So, you know, you have to be prepared for that pushback because there will be, and you'll be, you know, there's an old Southern racist phrase, nigger lover. You'll get treated like that. And you have to make sure that that's okay with you because it doesn't get easier. The moment you open the door, we're showing you the door, you have to walk through, but I'm telling you, there's some shit on the other side. And you've got to have your beekeeper's, your hazmat uniform on and still spray the antibacterial spray around, get rid of the pathogen of racism, white supremacy.
You know, and I think, Heather, that was my question back to you, is that what's your full transparency? What's your intentions when those songs come on, when they're playing those games, when those things begin to start happening again, because you are aware, you are very aware, what will you do different?
I will speak up and I will educate. And honestly, I feel like I'm a very courageous being. I'm learning more and more how courageous I am and resilient I am. And I shared this with Sommer, Joy, and Antoinette a week or so ago in another circle that I had a life-altering experience in the time since we all met, which was a wreck. An automobile wreck that it's quite miraculous that I walked away from it. And I'm in a space now within myself that my convictions are so strong that I am willing to do and say and be, it's more be. I am willing to be whatever it takes to be an active participant in the eradication of racism.
I love that. And that was one of the things I really love when you said white people, because if we say white people, the automatic clapback is not all white people. But I think, here sitting on this panel, and for all the people who are watching, I must stress this again. If you hear Black people saying white people, we are not saying all white people. Just like we don't like to be referred as all Black people do this or do that. All white people do not think and see alike as well, too. We're talking about certain trends or certain actions or whatever. And if we're addressing something that is done by white culture, that does not mean you specifically. So don't have to turn it back onto that we are talking specifically about that particular person, because we're bringing up white people need to fix this and need to fix that. And even when me and Summer even started this is how we even started the show, was like, you say white people, and it's like, oh, it's like, wait a second, can we just get to the conversation? We're not talking about you specifically or particularly, or about, we have to get to these issues. But the fragility comes back because we're saying white people. But I'm glad that you say it. And I'm hoping that, as you go out there and you're just telling other white people, it's like when you're reading articles or posts or conversations, specifically saying white people, it is not individual behaviors, but what we're seeing as like a culture, society on systemic racism that need to be addressed.
Yes.
And I know this is going to be a toughie as well too, because like I said, sometimes combating anti-racism is like, maybe they might not say anything racist at the dinner table, but if you do mention something, because a lot of times if people mention BLM, the first thing they want to do is get political, and they want to talk about the organization. So this is just my tip throwing out there for people. It's like the organization and Black Lives Mattering are two different things, So if you hear people say Black Lives Matter, not everybody is part of the organization. Not everybody stands by the views. Whether they do or they don't is irrelevant, because the point of the matter is that Black Lives Matter. And if we can't just talk about that humanitarian part of that, because that's not even political. I have to share this within my spirituality groups, because it's not a political issue. It's a moral issue. It's an issue that is a human issue with human dignity and everything. So this is my challenge to everybody. Like I said, you don't have to wait for them to say the N-word or to say something offensive. Bring it up yourself and say, do you know that Black Lives Matter? I was like, do you understand that Black Lives Matter? Or it's like, how do you feel about Black Lives Matter? If you even just ask them that, because like I ask people, are you spiritual, religious? They'll give you an answer. It's like, what do you think of Black Lives Matter? And they say, oh, the no, we're not talking about Soros. We're not talking about the organization. What do you think about Black Lives Matter? What do you think? And then there's your chance to sit there and have that conversation with them and challenge them. It's like, do you think it's like, and here's one of the instance, well, all lives matter, or because their lives shouldn't matter anymore. I would never say that. Whatever. It's like, well, I don't think they've ever said that. I don't think anybody who said Black Lives Matter ever said that their lives mattered more than anybody else's. That's another response. So my challenge out to the viewers and everybody else going for Thanksgiving, whatever, it's like, hey, we're all thankful for so many things, but but do Black Lives matter to you? Are we thankful? And they are thankful too, but they would like to be more thankful, challenge accepted. Yes, Summer.
I just wanted to say too, I love how like this whole conversation started. In some ways, I think there's so many tools within this conversation that we've been having now for 6 months, layers of tools that I just want to like acknowledge that's here in the space. And I really appreciated how Nichelle said, okay, let's discover here in this space the definition of racism, like to understand where we're all at. And I just think about with some of my family members that I've been in conversations, which is great, like to just start having that conversation and get more courageous. But what I'm even more interested in is how to take the conversation deeper or even safer beyond where there's some conversations I have with certain family members that feels like it only goes to a certain place. And so when I think about the whole topic of this session is I'm not racist, but am I anti-racist, is thinking about, as we're coming together with family this week, and it's a time where people obviously get to discover more of their differences at the dinner table or in a Zoom call. I just really am wanting to explore how to have the conversation where I can, I'm thinking too of a conversation we had a month ago with Mira, Nichelle, and she talked about the healing the inner racist. And I think that there's such a connection to the inner child and the response in some ways of why racism even exists here. It was like this response, white people were like, I need to make money. And then they, created this supreme, and we're going to make money and then diminish Black people and have them be our slaves. It's like, I think about that like decision that was so insane that was made at the moment of what has, catalyzed here we are in 2020, where it's like thinking about that decision that was made, and that there's this like this child like really frustrated, afraid, wants to be like powerful, doesn't want to lose what they know and what they have, and how to like get to that part of like my family members or certain people where I'm wanting to get in conversation, and the inner racist within myself, how to keep, as Heather's saying, keep checking in and keep getting more and more clear and taking the layers off of my own racism and participation in what has harmed people in this room and people that are harmed, the indigenous people, of the whole reason we have a Thanksgiving. It's like, it's completely harmful for so many indigenous people. So yeah, it's like, I'm thinking coming to that space of feeling, as Quinlan was asking, is it a feeling? Is it a thought? I agree. It's everything. It's both. It's all of it. But how to consciously, with intention, how can I come to that space with a much deeper possibilities to get to more productive space? So that's, I don't know, just something I wanted to add in.
Thank you, Summer.
I'm loving that.
I love that. And I just to be clear, I want to.
Well said, Summer.
Yes, thank you, Summer. And I do want to turn the floor back over to the panelists, but something you just mentioned about the Thanksgiving and about the harm. And I want people to be clear about this as well, too. Because, Thanksgiving is a very major Black holiday for us to come and get together. And for us, we're not celebrating Columbus. We all know what a stinking pig and dirty mass, murder this man was, and all because we understand the history. There's, just like I understand, I can tell you who all the monarchs were in Europe. I know about European history. I know about Asian history. Ask me about the dynasties of the Ming and Korea. I can tell you, but so it's not like we're ignoring or the atrocities of what has been done in America for our native and indigenous peoples of America. We're very, very, very well aware. And a lot of Black people are also part of that mixture and culture as well, too, which they never, ever really discuss, because it's like, there's a lot of history that was going on between Native Americans and freed slaves. And
also our family.
Exactly. So trust me, we get it and we know it. And I want, and I'm saying this to our Native American brothers and sisters and indigenous and our relatives, that we are not celebrating Columbus.
Yeah, our grandmother had a very special understanding about Andrew Jackson.
Right. We are not celebrating. We know full well what is going on. But for the rest of us who's like got that one day off, because, all the other holidays, we have to work them. Us Black and brown people get the one day off, which is Thanksgiving and Christmas, but we have to work all the other holidays. This is our time. And especially the reason why our family gets together so much is because we were separated for so long. We really do give thanks for each other and our families, so please don't be upset at us for showing all our mac and cheese and our turkey and our collard greens and the families getting together and stuff, because it meant in no way, no kind of disrespect and not trying to show any kind of harm. We are not celebrating Columbus, but we are celebrating giving thanks with their own families. And I know full well they would have all died and starved right there if if the natives didn't come and save them. We know this, Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, Ashley brought up a question. Sorry, Selena. Ashley brought up a question in the chat asking if anyone ever celebrates Columbus, and the answer is no. No one's thinking Columbus. Some people do actually.
Yeah, there
Do
here
people
here
still
in
celebrate
Columbia.
Columbus?
There's
Really?
an organization called the Knights of Columbus, and it's I had a client that was a member of that organization, and apparently it's a Catholic men's organization. I believe they have a very large house in downtown in the historical district here in Columbia. Just like that, we still have a John Birch Society and John Birch and a Robert Burns Society. Those are, I think I see those as community type things. And we do get Columbus Day off here in the state of South Carolina.
Talk about what is John Birch for those people who don't know. And
okay, I'm trying to remember because there was, I used to work for the South Carolina State Museum. That used to be my part-time job. And the John Birch Society,
what do they believe?
It's a
Klansman.
Does it really matter? I mean, right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to look it up because I don't want to misspeak.
I really would love to take this on another level, to be real.
Mm-hmm.
I need that right now because there's so many, I could just cry right now. I'm feeling so much from all of us. I'm feeling that I'm not with my family. I'm not going to be with my family till I don't know when. I miss my family. Just talked to my auntie on the phone last night. She lives in Berkeley, California. She's 80 years old. And so I feel like there has to be a higher purpose when I go so deep, when I deep dive into my emotions and I feel all what we're feeling, not only what we're saying, but what we're feeling deeper inside. And we're all suffering from this curse of racism for thousands of years now, right? And for me, it comes from hierarchy, right? It comes from separating people and disempowering people through separation and division. And we have a lot of that going on in our country at the moment. So the first thing is super painful separation because it's not our natural state. The second thing is being separated by race. It's sick. So when I confront people, and I have to do it a lot, I live in Europe presently, and I have to do it because the racism is so unconscious. People think they're not racist, but they don't have any experience to show them that they are racist. Do you know what I mean? So I gotta call that out. And when it's overt, this is my tip for the holidays, right? I look at people and I go, okay, I feel uncomfortable with that. And my question for you would be, what kind of world would you like to live in? For real. What kind of world would you like to live in? What kind of world would you like your children or grandchildren to live in? And how does that feel? If you're in a room where people are using words that hurt others, how does that feel to you? It doesn't feel good, right? This is what our sister Quinlan was speaking about. So not only feel into that, but think before it comes out of your mouth. Do you want to live in a world with peace and justice for all or not? Because that's not helping, my dear. And it hurts me in my body and in my soul to hear it. And I would like everyone to think about right here now, everyone in this panel and everyone who's watching, what can I do in the next month, 3 months, or 6 months to teach myself how to make steps to improve my community. It can be a small thing. It can be a small thing. It doesn't matter. But feel into it. What documentaries can I watch? Like our sister Antoinette was saying, what documentaries can I watch in the next 3 months to educate myself? What podcasts can I listen to? Because I want something. And every step, every action helps the bigger action. Right? Personally, I would like to name it Thanksgiving. Give thanks for all people on this planet. I would have a long title for Thanksgiving. Give thanks for all people of all persuasions on this planet, because that's who we are on planet Earth. So this is my shout out to all of our humanity, everyone listening. Let us step up, because we can talk and we are like, these women here are on fire. But to really create change, we got to make action with our speech. And we got, you know what, Gil Scott Heron, we got to work for peace. And so we have to work for an anti-racist society. So please tell me all what you're going to do, because we're here doing something. All of these humans, females, are here doing something today. It's 2 o'clock in the morning for me or something like that. I'm sweating, I feel passionate, and I'm here working towards my goal, which is that my children and grandchildren, you know, my son here was called an ape, was called what's wrong with your hair. I mean, we've all been through it. It's so painful, you know. And so let's step up into that field. And so this is a cool challenge. We're going to call this what? Come on, let's give our challenge a name. Is this the Thanksgiving challenge or what is it? Sister.
I say the Thanksgiving challenge. Like that's my request. I said everybody ask the family at dinner, do Black Lives Matter?
Let's stir it up.
I do think it's important. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mira Michelle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I do believe like some.
And thank you for that regarding your family. And yes, you're right. Not everybody. And this is the first year that I'm actually not doing Thanksgiving. And I always do this. And it's always open house for everyone. Because my family is so large, I've always chosen to just do it for all the other people who couldn't actually go home. You know, I've got 50 houses I can go to, but I was like, we always open our homes for everybody else because not everybody can. So we're not doing it this year, but I did encourage, and I told a lot of other people to do, and our family is going to do it this time too, is to do the Zoom Thanksgiving. They said, even if we just check in for 10 minutes with each other, 2 p.m. Thursday, everybody jump in and say hello, teach the old folks how to use Zoom and everything, but to connect. And you're absolutely right. We are disconnected. This is not natural. It is not godly. It's not spiritual. This is, you know, these are evil forces at work, but we have to be much, much, much stronger, you know, so we can combat and keep our own mental health and sanity alive and stuff, you know, and we can do that with each other and with all our friends and families and stuff, you know, because we're here for each other. We got to be here for each other, and we got to stay strong and to keep pushing, you know. Yeah.
Ashe.
Man. Mm-hmm.
And Quinlan, you also started to say something. I want to hear what you were going to say.
I just wanted to say in just with Sommer being safe with the conversations, you know, because sometimes relatives and people aren't there where we are. And I can't change your actions and reactions, but I can definitely work on my own. And so if a conversation becomes too volatile or it's not going anywhere, shut it down. Stay in control of the conversation, shut it down.
It also might be easier to like choose one person at a time who can be, you know, who can grow the alliance with you.
Take them out.
So, I mean, if I just went in, I've got, my mom has 5 brothers. So like, if I just went in and like, my 10 cousins and my 5 brothers and my grandma and be like, hey, everybody, like, who really knows what kind of, all kinds of, it would be uncontrollable and potentially destructive and not constructive, right? So it is good to take caution. And
that in itself speaks volumes. Ashley knows that people in her family are going to react a certain way when the topic of Black Lives Mattering comes forth.
oh yeah, it's a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. Oh yeah, especially the older generations. I can talk to all my cousins about it, all my cousins, comfortably, really comfortably. But older generations, not as comfortable with the conversation and not as prepared or in the conversation either. So there's a little, you gotta warm people up kind of, but it's a worthy cause, and we've got to do it. So
it's for all of us.
Try to take you out there, the balls out on them.
I think, yeah, it's a human right that we're fighting for, not just a cause. This is basic human rights. How can a dog have more human rights than a human being because of skin color? So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and we can see the work that is to be done. We take it, however, those who need baby steps, give them the Gerber baby spoon, and those who are for more advanced, you can give them the hungry man plate. But everybody's got to eat. I'm done with my metaphors.
Hungry man plate was a good one.
Yes, Summer.
I just want to say too, I appreciate about the sense that there may be some conversations that aren't meant to have, or that there needs to be an end to it. And I don't know if it's that it needs to be an end, but finding a way to the heart again. It's like I'm thinking of a few conversations I've had that have been like, oh, this is really hard right now. And then it's like, okay, if I could just put myself in that, I'm not going to say my family members' names, into their body, what is it that we are in this moment of like, where are we actually in agreement? And so I want to say, I hope conversations don't come to an end. I hope that maybe like this conversation, and I will say of this particular person I'm thinking of in my family, a few of our conversation, few months back, I remember talking about this person in this space, and I would say because this person has gotten more like outwardly open about their racism, that I have gotten deeper in touch with them, like because they're more like, okay, this is what's up for me, and I'm more racist than I ever have, or some of these conversations that I've had with this person, there is something, yes, it's not like complete, but it feels like, wow, we're getting somewhere. And I want to keep having the conversation. So, I mean, I just want to say, I don't know if it's really about ending, but like finding a point of like, okay, let's maybe just bookmark this or soften into a place of common ground. Because I feel that this is like so important to not have to stop the conversations either. But anyways.
Definitely. Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to something, it hurts us when we hold hate or bitterness or resentment in our physical bodies. I'm a healer and energy psychologist. And what I will say is, darling, let's pray, because that is hurting you. That going with vulnerability sometimes. Going with yes to your family member or to anyone who wants to hear that, going with vulnerability and saying like, that must hurt you. Every time you have one of those thoughts, it's hurting your physical body. It's heightening your cortisol levels. It's creating stress in your system, you know, and it's a chronic stress and you're carrying it. Anytime we carry hate, our bodies, our biology of our bodies run on honesty, run on honor, actually, you know. So I would really suggest you start healing before you start hurting. That's what my family mom would say. You better start healing before you start hurting, honey. You know, you better get rid of that chip off your shoulder.
Can I just
That's
add
real.
one more thing? Is it because I have had these conversations in my family, and I would like to share something that has worked in conversation, in difficult conversation, because it can be
Yes, and
difficult.
we can close with that. That would be awesome, Ashley.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. It's you know, some people won't acknowledge their vulnerabilities, right? Mira, Nichelle, I love your approach. Like for me, I'm like a full yes to that. You know, I can receive that, and I can sit with that, and I can acknowledge it. I'm also fairly well informed as a yoga teacher, and having dabbled in a variety of healing modalities myself, I understand the truth behind that. Some people don't, and others also have a hard time acknowledging the feeling behind everything else. And one thing that has helped me move past those difficult, challenging moments is, and this is more so inspired by Sommer, she reminded me, she was like, yeah, if I just try to put myself in my family member's shoes, you can ask your family member, what if this was against me? What if this was against my group of people, whatever that is? What if my life was in danger? Then how would you feel? How would you feel about this conversation? How imperative would this conversation be then? And it's worked. They're like, they get a little contemplative, you know, they're like, okay, well, and this is something that, you know, but you don't have to give them the hungry man straight up right away, right? But you can plant those seeds, and you can do it in a way that uses empathy, even if they're not ready to be vulnerable. You know, bring it to their minds first, and then let it recalibrate, let it settle in, and things start to change. It's actually the particular person I've used this with. I've worked through a lot of familial type things with this person, and they progressively experience more joy in life and more lightness. And you know, it's true that anger and hate and all kinds of negativity really does poison us, an individual. And the more openness we bring into our, the more we listen, the more we feel, the more we care, the more joy and connection we experience, the more lightness we experience in life. And that in and of itself is, you know, we all need that. We all need that. So that's all. Just that's all I had to say. Yeah.
We'll be wrapping it up, and I want to encourage you both to, you know, those who are going to go out there and say something with your families. You don't have to go all balls out, like I was saying. You know, there's a time and a place, and the spoon feeding that can happen with these conversations. And I want to encourage you that there's been people who've called me racist many times. I get called this almost every other day because I talk about race. You know, I mean, really simply me talking about race, and they just really get very upset. They get very mad. They get very offended. So you're going to be dealing with things like that. But I encourage you to just keep speaking about it, because just lately, and it's weird, just after some of these conversations where people have been watching me for years and saying these things, that there have been some revelations. I mean, it may have taken 10 years for them to sit there and say, you know something, Antoinette, I've been watching the things that you've been posting about and the things that you have talked about, and I'm starting to understand, and I'm starting to get it. And I want to apologize to you for calling you a racist, because I was insecure in my own white privilege and my own fragility and different things. And that really, really touched me, because I was just sitting there thinking, am I just talking to the wall? You know, because I just kept on talking. I mean, years and years and years later. So really, technically, having these little conversations that you're having with your friends, family, and coworkers, it's going to take years, 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 and years and years, you know. So don't feel discouraged and don't give up, and just know that your sisters are strong with you, you know, and we're here to support you no matter what. You know, I'll tag you in some interesting things so that way they can start the conversation, and I'll be your backup, you know, to sit there and support you in there as well too. You know, because the more that we talk about it, the more that we expose it, the more understanding that we're all going to start to be able to gain and be like, wow, it was not so bad as we thought it was. It was really just what we perceived to be. But I can understand, just like what you said, Ashley, someone told me that it was the media that was causing the division in South Africa. And girl, you know, I lit up because I was like, if it was you, if it was your child, if it was your child, you know, think about that, you know. And then when they put that into their perspective, don't tell me about media or what somebody else says. If it was your child that these things were happening to you, you would automatically have a different perspective, you know. So good luck with all your challenges. And Summer, you want to tell us about the next date that we're getting together and having our conversation again?
Yes, I have to look at my calendar because it's going to be a combination as well. It's near Antoinette's birthday, by the way. So it will be honoring your birthday, Antoinette, and it'll be on December 23rd, which is
28th.
so excuse me, or 23rd. Yeah, or no? Am
You
I off?
created the event, it says 28th.
Oh, well, maybe I have. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong month. Sorry, it's been a long day. Yes, the 28th, December 28th at 3 p.m. is a Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific. Come join us. And yes, we are also, you know, always expanding the conversation with more women. It's so wonderful to have Nancy here, and also Nina's back, and Heather. That, you know, I do also want to say we're always interested to have more diverse women in this conversation, really about honoring Black lives. It really does stem from this conversation, and we will have now part 3 of this topic of I am not a racist, but am I anti-racist? So please come back, and there's all of these videos are available now on a YouTube channel. Antoinette has that going, and we're just, you know, we're in this.
WallowMomsInternational.com or Wall of Moms International YouTube channels, where you can find all of these videos that go back from the beginning and all these continuing conversations. And I also just want to add too, just like you said, what are we doing? We're doing a lot of things. We've got so much going on. But tonight at 6 p.m., which is going to be every single Monday, and I offer this to all people, you know, whoever's watching and whoever's interested, is Learn to Lobby 101. All the issues that we've been talking about and the changes that we actually want to see, we have the voice of the people. We can actually take and help push laws, change laws, speak at city council, speak at, you know, education, the school boards, different things like that. So if you really want to get out there and do something and be participant in the democracy, in the political process, we're offering this free class every Monday at 6 p.m. You know, so everybody's welcome to join to learn it, you know, from the basic hand holding steps and everything. And the videos are on YouTube. And thank you to the SINE network, you know, with Summer Joy for the network, for being able to, for us to be able to share our Zoom across hundreds of networks and organizations. You know, so even though we think we're just talking to each other, there's a lot of people watching. They may not be saying much. There's some comments, which next time I would love to be able to get into the questions and comments that people are asking. But there's also a lot of lurkers. You know, there's going to be a lot of people who are just kind of just watching and seeing what we're saying. But this is good. You know, we're getting out there. So thank you.
And I also just want to say too, part of what I've realized, a conversation I recently had with Antoinette, that in SINE, we often talk about, in the culture building of SINE, is in SINE we spruce, speaking truth with love and compassion. And, you know, I think there's been quite an evolution to recognizing, wow, there's a lot more to compassion that we're not doing in the SINE network. So I want to say that this conversation that we've now been doing for 6 months will be a part of an orientation for SINE members to get on board with how to really build anti-racism. Culture building is part of sprucing and it's part of this recognition. So that's something that I'm working with, really, I mean, all of you, but that is something that is going to be part of the education. So I just want to thank you all for, you know, being a part of this and educating me and educating many.
Can I say one thing, please? I just want to thank all of you, because you have given me some splendid food for thought, things I hadn't thought of. So I thank you. I look forward to next time.
I want to thank everyone who was here, including our new participants, Selena Brown, my cousin, Nancy Hill, and our regulars, Summer Joy, Nina Magpili, Antoinette Rootsdawtah, Dr. Quinlan Strong, Heather Neary, Mira Michelle, and Ashley, who had to go.
Love you, ladies.